Proverbs 6, I'm going to start reading in verse 1. It says, "My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger, thou art snared with the words of thy mouth, thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself. When thou art come into the hand of thy friend, go, humble thyself, and make sure thy friend. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which, having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man." Let's go ahead. We'll stop there and you can go ahead and be seated. I have tossed around a bunch of different names to give this message. I text Miss Connie one. I don't remember now what it was, but there's been a bunch of different ideas that I've had with it. All of them kind of boiling down to this same idea, and that is learn a lesson from a bug. Learn a lesson from this bug. So in doing some research, because you have verse 6 where it says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise." Where the Bible is telling us, look at this ant and figure out what it's doing and be wise. So in doing some research for this message tonight, I looked up ant statistics. You know, they're interesting little things anyways, but ants are amazing little creatures. You know, we normally just think of them as annoying. It's typically the thought. You know, you go to eat outside, and before you know it, there's an army of ants trying to steal your food. Today, we ate outside for Kaylee's birthday, and, you know, kids drop food everywhere, and before you know it, there's a million ants there trying to snag it. A few weeks ago, I was carrying some food in the back of my truck, and one of them was like a stew or something like that, and it had a liquid that spilled in the back of my truck and out of my truck onto the driveway. When we came back by later, I thought that whatever it was, I was really wondering what we were eating, because I thought whatever it was had made like a black circle in the driveway, because there was a wet spot and then this black circle. I was, couldn't figure out what it was until I got close enough and looked, and the black circle was moving. It was had to have been thousands of ants circled around this little wet spot there trying to see what they could take from it. And that's what we usually think about ants, is annoying little thieves. That's kind of the mindset we have in them. But, I wanted to see kind of a slightly different light, because the passage is looking at them in a very positive light, saying, consider her ways and you'll be wise. That's not saying she's an annoying little ant or annoying little bug, annoying little thief. This is a positive light here. So I looked up some stuff, and most of this we've heard, but it's still kind of a good reminder, and was some of it is stuff that I had never heard. There are over 12,000 different species of ants. 12,000 different species. Some of the most common, according to their list, which I thought was funny. Now, this is the list of common ants, and I knew like 2 names on this list. The carpenter ant, the weaver ant, the fire ant. I take it back. There were 3 that I knew. The bullet ant, and the list went on and on and on. The lifespan of an ant obviously varies, just like anything else, depending on what species of ant and how many people are trying to stomp on it. But depending on the ant, it was anywhere from a couple of months to some that live nearly 20 years. And I found this interesting. I looked up the biggest killer of ants, and I expected all sorts of things. But everything, except for one, I should say, all but one on the top 10 list was other bugs. The biggest killers of ants was other bugs. Everything from beetles to wasps. The only thing that wasn't a bug on that list was a certain kind of snail that allows itself to be captured by the ants, and then once it's inside, eats them all. But most of them, it was beetles and bugs beetles and wasps, those sorts that, I guess, infiltrate the anthill and attack from the inside. But the biggest killer, the number one killer for ants every year, is ants. They kill themselves. Apparently, they are fighters, and they kill bunches of each other every single year. Some of those, from what I read, now this is all, who knows how accurate it is. I Googled it, so if I'm wrong, blame Google. But some of those were different species coming into the nest and fighting over food, but many of those, at least according to multiple sites that I read while studying for this, most of the deaths of ants were from ants in the same nest getting mad at each other over food and killing each other over it. So kind of some interesting facts. Couple more, and then I'll be done. I'll move on. Queen ants normally live twice as long as the rest of the ants, and in their lifetime have millions of babies. Then the last fact: an ant, and this we kind of knew, but puts it in perspective a little bit. An ant can lift 20 times their weight. 20 times. So you put that in perspective. I looked it up. The average U.S. man weighs 200 pounds. So if we had the strength of an ant, the average American male could lift a rhinoceros. Yeah. That's 4,000 pounds, 2 tons. We don't think of ants this way. We think that, they're pests. To some people, they're gross. I won't name names, but there was someone I found out recently who literally cries when they see an ant. Think of them as these gross little creatures. But in reality, they're mighty little creatures. The reading I did this week said that why large animals and large predators were not the big killers of ants was because of their sheer number, strength, and problem-solving skills. They can keep predators, large predators, out of their homes. They're tough little creatures, and anyone who's tried to stomp on an ant knows that. You never kill them the first time around. Why in the world, though, at this point, there's probably someone sitting here saying, okay, I'm done. Why are we spending this much time learning about a bug? Here's why: because the Bible felt it important enough to use this bug as an example for us to look at. And it even takes it a step further and tells us, go look at this bug and you ought to model yourself after it. You ought to learn some things from it. Do what this bug does, which is a weird thought to us, but that's what we're seeing here in this passage. I have 3 things tonight that I want us to see in the passage about the ant that as a Christian we ought to apply to ourselves. And as the passage says, if we will, we'll be wise. 3 examples that we get from the ant. The first is, the ant doesn't have to be told to work. You look at verse 6 and verse 7. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Verse 7, which having no guide or overseer or ruler. And it goes on talking about that from there. She provideth her meat and gathereth her food, but having no guide, no overseer, no ruler. Think about this. You never see a lazy ant. You don't see it. You don't see an ant lying around watching TV. You don't see him playing video games for hours. You don't, in fact, ever see an ant holding still. Yeah. They're constantly moving, constantly looking for food or telling others about food or carrying food, protecting their home. They're always doing something. But I thought, maybe that's just what we can see. Maybe it's different when they're in the nest. So again, I looked it up, and here's what I found. The average worker ant only stops to sleep for 8 minutes at a time. Now it does that, takes lots of little, it takes lots of little power naps throughout the day, but only adding up to a few hours a day. It doesn't take much time to stop and rest, but what is amazing about that to me is it doesn't need something over it to force it to keep working. Doesn't have to have someone watching it to make sure that it's not sleeping too long. Just keeps moving. In the nest, the queen is obviously in charge, but once out, there's no one ant over another. I found myself that very interesting. You know what I think it is? We see cartoons like, I think it's called A Bug's Life or something like that, where you see, the general ant and all that sort of stuff. And so in our mind, and this might just be me being naive, but in my mind, I thought that's how it must be. I mean, that's what the cartoon shows. That's what it has to be. There's no general ant. There is no ant over the other. I personally found that interesting. There's no other ant commanding that they keep moving. They just do it, which tells me that each ant must see the need. For that to be true, for them to work all day long, every single day, without someone or something standing over them, cracking the whip, if you will, that means that each ant has to understand that there's a need for their work. Because without that, it just wouldn't be the case. Now, I'm a plumber, so this makes sense to me. Sorry if it doesn't to you, but you have to live with it. Useless info that you'll probably never use again, but this works for me. Modern plumbing is credited with curing epidemics like the bubonic plague. And it was spread by being unclean, and it stopped being an issue when indoor plumbing started being consistent. So because of that, and we're getting to why I'm telling this story, because of that, in the early years of plumbing, plumbers were very highly respected. No joke, almost thought of on the same plane as doctors, because doctors had no cure for this, plumbers did. So they were thought, very, very, very highly of, and because of that, for years, to become a plumber, no joke, you had to take an oath. Like the government sat you down, you had to put your hand on a Bible and take an oath that you would uphold certain standards. Now at this point, that's obviously gone by the wayside, and I could insert all sorts of plumber puns right there, but I'm not going to. But they required that oath for a lot of years, and the reason was this: to make sure they understood the need for their work. Was the reason for it was when you sit down and have to go through all of this swearing in to become a plumber, you realize, hey, what I'm doing is actually kind of important. Because if we don't understand the need, we don't take what we do seriously. For this to be true of the ants, they must see that there is a need for their work. For this to be true, they must see that there is a severity for their work. Again, having no one forcing them to keep working, and yet they keep working. For that to make sense, or for that, it makes sense that they see the importance of the job that they're doing. I want to point this out now because I'll refer back to it later, that the importance of what they do is for more than just them. Their work, you pick out one single ant. That ant's work does more than just feed them today. That ant's work feeds him, yes, but it also feeds the entire nest, as well as, take it a step further beyond that, it helps the nest to survive, so that in reality, his work helps countless future generations. But the more I kind of think of it, and them seeing the need for their work and seeing the severity of their work that keeps them doing it despite no one watching them, it brings me to this kind of interesting, at least to me, idea. You know what? I'm going to start that whole paragraph again. My eyes are really messing with me, and so I tried to make sense of that paragraph in my notes, and it really made no sense at all. So I tried to just talk it out, and it didn't make any sense either. So I'm going to start that again, pretend that didn't happen at all. Okay. For this to be the case, that they don't have to have anyone over them, they don't have to have anyone making sure they work, it makes sense that they see the need for their work, and it makes sense that they see the severity of their work, the importance of what they do, but it also makes sense that they see, or that they obey orders. I'll just keep it simple like that they obey orders. They've been given an order by the queen to go out and work, to find food so that their home can survive, so that future generations can survive, and they don't have to have someone standing over them making sure they do. They were given an order, and they obey it. They don't have to have someone stand over them and make sure they're doing it. They're given an order, so they obey. The application from this point to us is pretty obvious. Just like the ant, it shouldn't be that our pastor has to stand over us making sure that we're doing the work. It shouldn't be that myself or the pastor have to get up here every week and remind us to go door knocking or to go witnessing. And it wouldn't be that way if, like the ant, we saw the need. if we saw the importance of the work that we're doing, if we understood that without witnessing, people are dying and going to hell. This is a big deal. This isn't something that we should just kind of put on the back burner and hope that someone else witnesses to them. If we really understood the need for our work, we'd be doing it more. We wouldn't have to be reminded if we really understood the severity of our work. That this doesn't just affect me, again, like the ant. It doesn't just affect that one single ant. This isn't just something that will grow me spiritually. It'll do that, just like the food also benefits that ant, but it's bigger than just you. It's bigger than just me. This affects all those that you witness to and countless others. I think about Paul on his missionary journeys. Taking those, he would have, from the experience, the time with the Lord and those things, he would have grown spiritually. And while he was on them, huge numbers of people got saved. But that isn't where it stopped. It's passed down and gone to future generations, so that now there are still people that are getting saved because of the work that Paul started. If we understood the severity of our job, of the work that we were supposed to be doing, we wouldn't have to be told to do the work. We wouldn't have to be told to do the work if we just simply learn to obey. We know that we've been given an order. We know verses like the Great Commission. My devotions, I just read the Great Commission again. It was yesterday. We wouldn't need someone standing over us, someone reminding us, telling us to go, if we just obeyed the command the first time. First thing that I want us to see about the ant tonight is it doesn't have to be told to work. The second thing I want us to see tonight is the ant knows when to work. Look at verse 8. It says, provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. Now think about this ant, a tiny little creature whose head isn't much bigger than the tip of a pencil, which means its brain has to be smaller than that. And yet, it can tell the difference in the seasons. This tiny little thing can tell the difference in the seasons. They can tell when it's time to do their work at home, provide her meat, and they can tell when it's time to gather in the harvest. And I'll just simplify this. They understand when it's time to work, and when it's time, and when it is that time, the time to work, that's exactly what they do. Now, transition this over to the Christian here is really, really easy, especially because the passage talking about the ant uses the harvest. I think of Matthew 9, 37 and 38. Then saith he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. The ant understands that the harvest is the time to do the work. This is when you're going to go start gathering. And Jesus is saying to his disciples, it's harvest time. Now let's put a really obvious 2 and 2 together here. The time for work is now. Time for work for us is now. I think of a farmer. A farmer lives for the harvest. Growing up, I grew up next to a farm, and my brother and I worked on the farm every summer. So understand a little bit about farming. Farmers survive the rest of the year because 9 months out of the year they're making no money. They have bills, they're having to pay hired hands, they're having to pay for seed, they're having to do work to grow the crop, but for majority of the year they're making no money at all. So they live for that harvest. They survive the rest of the year for when that harvest is, because that's when they're going to make their money. And the day that harvest comes, it's all hands on deck, and nothing else is more important until the harvest is done. They don't get distracted by other things. They don't take time off during the harvest. The harvest is here, and the entire focus is on that harvest. It's time to do the work. You'll never hear a farmer say that the harvest came at an inconvenient time for me, so we pushed it off a few weeks. And if you did hear a farmer say that, he was probably an ex-farmer who lost his farm because he couldn't pay his bills. Because when it's harvest time, you have to harvest. And the same is true for Christians. Same is true for us. The time is now. Don't make excuses. Don't come up with reasons that you think you can't do the work now. Just do it. Listen, I understand being busy. I understand how that would be a really easy excuse to give. I'm usually running like a chicken with my head cut off. I was going to give an example there. I'm not going to. But is being really busy really a good excuse to not tell someone about Christ? I mean, just think for a minute. Take a selfish moment here. Take a selfish moment. Is your being busy really so important? Even thinking selfishly, is my being busy really so important that it takes priority over someone's eternity in hell? I mean, even if I'm thinking of selfish reasons, that just doesn't work. My being busy is not a good excuse to not be a witness, to not tell someone about Christ. Again, if a farmer decides he's too busy to harvest right now, how's that going to turn out? It's not going to end well for him. The time is now. Don't make excuses. The time is now. Don't delay. Don't put it off. It's what we typically do. It sounds really bad if we say we aren't going to do something for God, right? I mean, it sounds terrible if we say, well, God, I know you want me to do this, but I don't want to. So instead, here's what we do. We delay it indefinitely. We come up with reasons of, well, here's why I can't right now. You know, I can't do this right now, but I will someday, God. The problem is, someday never happens. Because as long as you're willing to let things get in the way of obeying God, Satan is thrilled to keep throwing things your way. Don't delay. If the farmer delays, he'll miss the harvest. If the ant delays, he's going to miss his opportunity to gather food. The ant understands when it's time to work, when the time to work is, and when the harvest is, you get to work. And we ought to be that same way that we see it's harvest time. I need to get to work. So far tonight, we've seen two things about the ant. It doesn't have to be told to work. It knows when to work, the right time to work. And then lastly tonight, we'll see the ant, and I'm just going to word it this way, the ant is prepared. It does its work in the summer. It does its gathering in the harvest so that when the winter comes, when the time when there is no harvest, the ant is ready. It's ready. It's prepared. You think of when winter comes, the chance to gather is gone. For a few reasons. The obvious, the opportunity to gather is gone, or is at least not as plentiful. In the summer, there's opportunities galore for bugs to gather food, whether it's stealing your picnic, gathering crumbs left by people, or literally harvest parts of plants and all that. The options abound, but when winter hits, those are gone. But in winter, not only are those things not plenteous, but also dangers abound. I don't know if you ever thought about this, and I know I never had until I was reading this week. Did you know the average raindrop can crush an ant? Don't think of it. It's a raindrop. We live in Washington. Probably 1 billion of them hit your head in 1 year. An ant, being as small as it is, an average raindrop can crush it. You start factoring in things like that, severe weather and those sorts of things, and not only are there not as many options for food in the winter, but trying to find food would be very hazardous. You could lose your life trying to find some food. Their chance to gather is gone, but you don't see them trying in the winter because they worked when they needed to, and when winter comes, they're ready. For the Christian, right now is the time of harvest. We've already looked at that. I'm not going to beat a dead horse with this. Right now is the time of harvest. But just like any harvest, eventually that time will run out. It won't last forever. The farmer has a very limited window to harvest his crop before the time is too late. The ant has a very specific time frame that they can harvest. For the Christian, the harvest is now, but we don't know how long that window will be open. Work now, so you're not caught unprepared. But remembering, your work isn't just for you. So work now, so those around you aren't unprepared. I think, personally a little bit, if Jesus returned today, who around me wouldn't be ready? I know that I've accepted Christ. I know that when Jesus comes, I'll be going straight to heaven with Him. But as I was studying this, that's what got my attention is, and really got me thinking about is who around me. Who have or what opportunities have I not taken to work? Who around me would not be prepared for Christ's return because I decided I didn't want to work? What friend, what neighbor, what loved one, coworker would be found lost? I'll wrap up to tonight's message very, very similar, or very, very simply and somewhat similar to how the passage does. Take an example from the ant and get to work while you can. As I studied for this, I told you it reminded me of two songs. The one that they sang before the message. The other song that reminded me of was the song So Little Time. First verse in the chorus that says, "So little time, the harvest will be over. Our reaping done, we reapers taken home. Report our work to Jesus, Lord of harvest, and hope He'll smile, and that He'll say, well done. Today we reap or miss our golden harvest. Today is given us lost souls to win. Oh, then to save some dear one from the burning, today we'll go to bring some sinner in." Notice a couple of things in that. So little time, start of it. So little time, the harvest will be open. And then how many times it says, today. Today we reap or miss our golden harvest. Today is given us lost souls to win. Today is the day of harvest. So let's work while you can. Let's pray.